Hey everyone, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor and trauma therapist. Today we're going to talk about perfectionism. So if you have childhood trauma, you most likely can relate to this particular wounded part. So today we're going to talk about how to heal perfectionism. So if this is something that causes a lot of distress in your life, causes you a lot of anxiety, causes you to really have a hard time making goals happen because you're so afraid of even starting if it's not good enough. If you have a hard time easing up control in your life, a little bit OCD, personality traits, perhaps a little control freak part, so to speak. Perfectionism can show up as that in our life as well. So we're going to go over what causes perfectionism. We're going to talk about the IFS lens of looking at perfectionism. That's internal family systems therapy, for those that don't know. It's my favorite method for working with trauma. And then we're going to talk about the roles or jobs that this part takes on, the part's greatest fear, basically what holds it back from healing, and then the antidote, so what this part needs to heal as well. And we'll also talk about the 8 C's of self, so when you know you're in your authentic self that's unwounded versus the wounded part. So we're going to be covering lots of great information today. I hope you will find this helpful. I have lots of other videos on my channel as well that goes over many other parts if you like this type of information and are finding it helpful. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So what are some of the causes of this perfectionistic part getting born? So it may come as no surprise to many of you, but perfectionism really is rooted in childhood abuse and neglect as well. Specifically, parents that were frequently criticizing, they were frequently shaming, like you could never feel that you could do anything right, not to the parent standard at least. Parents were very rigid, very controlling. There wasn't a lot of flexibility and encouragement in your childhood. Parents that only praised you when you performed well. This is a phrase I like to use to describe this is praise for doing versus praise for being. So this is a very important concept that a lot of my clients are not familiar with, that if in your childhood, if your parent only praised you for what you did, basically your performance, this can create this perfectionistic wound of like, I have to achieve at a very high level in order to feel good about myself or to get any type of praise, versus praise for being. So praise for being would look like something along the lines of, oh, honey, I'm so proud of you for making friends with that child on the playground who was lonely. That is such a kind and nice thing that you did. I'm so proud of you for how nice that you are. So you can see how the difference of versus like, oh, you got A's on your report card. Good job. Keep it up. Right? That's praise for doing versus praise for being. Praise for being really is you're praising the child for who they authentically really are. That is a much better way of encouraging children is for, you can use both, for example, as a parent, but you want to make sure that you're not only praising kids just for their achievements, because it can set up this part feeling like it has to perform at a very high level in order to, have some type of worth, basically. Only getting recognition for your achievements. That's basically what I just mentioned. Having unrealistic expectations when you were young. So I see this a lot as well. A lot of adults have very unrealistic expectations for children based on their age and development. You might have like a 12-year-old sibling that's expected to take care of like a 5 and a 3-year-old and do the dishes and iron the clothes, for example. That's like totally unrealistic. Kids are not supposed to be doing all the childcare and a lot of the adult chores around the house at the age of 12. So that's just an example, to give you an idea of what this would look like. So unrealistic expectations where the parents really expect the child, again, to perform at a much higher level than what their developmental age calls for. Severe excessive punishments when you were young as well, that can also create this part that feels like you have to be perfect. And parents that were also high achieving, or controlling. So maybe your parents were doctors or lawyers or something like that, and then they put on very extreme expectations that you also perform at a very high level. So these are just some of the parenting types and qualities that can really create this perfectionistic wound in young children who then grow up to be adults with this wounded part that can really cause a lot of distress. All right, before we get into the jobs and roles that this perfectionistic part can take on, I want to talk a little bit about IFS and specifically self-energy versus the part. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with self, just a quick overview. Essentially, IFS teaches that all of us are born with this beautiful, authentic self with inherent qualities of self, which I'll talk about here in just a second, the 8 C's. And what happens is if we have a childhood that's full of trauma, like abuse and neglect and screaming and yelling and shaming and criticizing, that type of stuff, what happens is your authentic self essentially has to disappear in favor of parts that help you stay safe and survive the abuse. So perfectionism, for example, would be a part that helped you stay safe. And we'll talk about that in just the next couple slides when we talk about the jobs and roles that this part takes on. But specifically, it's important to note what self-energy is so that you will know when you're in self-energy versus a part. So self is essentially, what I like to say is you're in self when you are not experiencing extreme emotions. So there will not be very strong emotions like fear and anger and sadness, for example. Instead, you'll feel very calm and centered when you're in self. And also, you're not going to have polarized and like black and white rigid thinking patterns either. If you have black and white rigid thinking patterns, that's going to be a sign that a part is active and that self-energy is not present. So IFS would teach that, again, that we all have that self-energy, but again, the more wounded and traumatized we are, the less we're really in self on a day-to-day basis, and the more we have parts that have taken over to help us stay safe. All right, let's talk about the 8 C's of self now. The 8 C's of self. All right, so these are the qualities that Richard Schwartz, the founder of IFS, has come up with to tell you what self-energy feels like and looks like. All right, so you'll feel a sense of calm. You'll feel a sense of creativity. So self is a very creative energy as well. Oftentimes when we're in that creative flow state, if we're painting or doing some sort of artistic or creative pursuit, that's very much self-energy. Courageous. So courage is a big trait of self-energy. So it doesn't mean like the total absence of fear, for example, but we have this courage to move through things that scare us. So that's a self quality. Clarity. So again, clarity is being able to clearly see what's going on in your environment and even what's going on within you as well. So again, that absence of those rigid black and white polarized beliefs, and instead this beautiful, clear seeing vision that you're able to better understand things because you don't have this strong emotion and polarized thought processes that are going on inside of you. Compassion is huge. So self is always compassionate. It's not judgmental at all. Curiosity. So this is something when clients are exploring these wounded parts with me in session, one thing that I always tell them is it's important to get curious about what's going on inside of you and to get curious about what the part needs. So the opposite of judgment, again, curiosity implies gentleness and an energy of compassion and interest in what the part has to say. And so, non-judgment is huge here. Connectedness. So when you're in self, you also feel connected not only to yourself, but again, to your environment and what's going on around you. It's very much a sense of wholeness. And confidence as well as the last 8C. So again, not ego, but just this this quiet confidence where you know your worth, you know your value, and you know who and what you stand for, and really ties into a sense of like, who am I, and love for yourself. All right, let's talk about the job and role that perfectionism plays within our system. All right, so we already talked about kind of some of the different things that we can go through as a child that can cause this perfectionistic part, but really, what is its main job or role? So its main job is to prevent you from making mistakes. And really, that ties into its direct fear. So its fear is, well, if you mess things up, horrible things are going to happen. So it definitely has this element of like catastrophization, that if you're not absolutely perfect at all times, horrible things are going to happen in your life, whether you lose people or you lose a job, or, it's definitely like a part that catastrophizes. It also believes that, if you aren't perfect, no one is going to love or accept you. So that also drives perfectionism. It wants you to perform, again, to that specific standard so that you won't be abandoned by other people. It also has a sense of being overly controlling, and very much this rigid, like, things must be performed or done at this specific standard because it doesn't want to fail. So failure, a loss of control, trying to prevent abandonment, or people not loving you or not feeling worthwhile, a lot of these drive this perfectionistic part to keep doing the job and role that it does to try to keep you safe. Okay, let's talk about the antidote now. So what can help this part heal so that it doesn't keep doing the same thing it's been doing, which no doubt has been causing you a lot of distress? All right, first and foremost, what we attempt to do with IFS is to build a relationship between the wounded part and your authentic self. Because oftentimes, if there's no relationship between the part and self, which there really isn't, because a lot of us as trauma survivors don't really go inside a lot, right? It's like, ooh, feelings, ooh, no. So there's a lot of avoidance. That's another part. Talked about that in another video. There's definitely a lot of avoidance that trauma survivors have with going inside and learning about themselves and getting curious about themselves. So for sure, there usually is a massive lacking between who they authentically are and these wounded parts, which makes sense because these parts have been running the show for a long time in order to keep your system as stable as possible and to survive whatever life stressors that you are going through. But what you find is that the more a beautiful relationship begins to happen between self oftentimes is this very nurturing, loving energy. What happens is the part learns that it can relax a little bit and release the reins of control to this beautiful, wise, almost like adult energy, I would say. This like loving mentor or teacher or even parent figure. Self has these types of qualities. And these wounded parts are oftentimes very much us, but at a much younger age. So whenever I always ask clients, like, how far back did perfectionism happen in your life? And a lot of times they're like, oh, as far back as I can remember. Okay, then that tells you this part is maybe 5, 6, 8, 10 years old. However far back you can remember having this strong drive to be perfect is about how old your wounded part is. So that's a good way to think about it, that this part is maybe, say, 8 years old, but your beautiful, authentic self is your current age. That part, and it's not a part, sorry, self is this authentic version of who you actually are. That is the wise you that is actually your real age. And that part has the capacity to nurture and care for your wounded child parts. And so the more this perfectionism has contact and a relationship with self, the more this part will step back and let self lead instead of perfectionism driving the bus off the cliff, so to speak. We also want to teach this part that its value is not dependent on its performance. So we're correcting these old messages that no longer serve it. We also want to increase compassion towards this part. This part is oftentimes incredibly exhausted. A lot of times when we're in session, I tell clients to direct compassion and gratitude towards these parts because they have been working so hard and they're oftentimes incredibly exhausted. And you would be amazed at how showing compassion and gratitude for the part increases its trust and willingness to work with authentic self and helps it to feel safer. And more likely to step back and let self lead. We also want to teach the part that mistakes are not a problem, that mistakes are how every one of us learn, and that really that's the process of growing in wisdom, is finding out what worked and what didn't work. And mistakes are just simply what didn't work. And you're allowed to course correct at any time. And we also want to teach the part progress, not perfection. So this is something I even encourage a lot of my clients. Put it on a sticky note and stick it somewhere where you can see it every day. Progress, not perfection. Any progress is good progress. It doesn't have to be perfect progress. Progress is progress. It doesn't matter how big or small. That's still part of the overall plan. Is progress is good, and it doesn't have to be perfect progress. So that's another important thing that this part needs to learn as well. Another funny way that I like to talk about perfectionism is with the term analysis paralysis. So I bet there are some of you that can relate to this. And this is where, again, the perfectionistic part is so concerned with doing things exactly right that it will not move towards any goal whatsoever. Like you could start a goal, say you're like, I want to declutter my home. But then analysis paralysis sets in as you're like, well, oh crap, but I want to do it just so, and I want it to be perfect, and I don't have the stuff to do it, all the organization I want to do it, and I need to make a trip to IKEA, but then, oh my gosh, all the stuff, I have to go through every cupboard, every drawer, oh, that's going to take forever, and before you know it, right, you've catastrophized in your mind that this is going to take forever, and it's not going to be done perfect in the way that you would like it to be done, so you never start and you never even work, even in baby steps towards this goal. So analysis paralysis can really screw people up in terms of being able to achieve goals. So the antidote to analysis paralysis is just start where you are. Start where you are, create very, very baby steps, small little baby steps. For example, if you're going to declutter your home, don't try to do it all at once. Maybe you're like, I will just declutter my desk today. That's it. And then stop. Literally, you want to make these goals achievable and realistic and pat yourself on the back and even reward yourself for even baby steps towards the bigger goal. And that will help you move from analysis paralysis to actually being able to make and hit some of these goals. And last but certainly not least, I want to point out on this "You Are Awesome" slide, because all of you are so amazingly awesome, just some additional important points that I wanted to wrap up as ways of healing this part, because this part is really a difficult one. I want you to start focusing on what brings you purpose and joy and meaning in your life. So the more you focus on what brings you joy and what brings you purpose and meaning, the less this perfectionistic part will take, control of your life. Purpose and meaning is unique for every single person. Maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's coaching, maybe you're a teacher and you love to work with kids, whatever it might be. I want you to focus more on what brings passion and joy and playfulness into your life, because that will really help heal this wound as well. Finding ways to play and reconnect with who you really are as well. So play is something that is very healing to our wounded child parts. So maybe you love to collect rocks as a child or something like that. Then go out on a trip out in nature and see if you can find some amazing rocks to bring home with you, for example. So I just want you to go participate in activities that spark that joy and that the creativity and playfulness again. Because again, that's going to help get in touch with that wounded part that, as I mentioned, is oftentimes at a very young age. It helps to kind of heal those child parts of us. Again, what I mentioned before in the prior slide, setting small, achievable, realistic goals. That's going to help you achieve a bigger goal much quicker, much more easily than setting a really unattainable, like a lofty goal. You don't want to do that because then you just feel bad about yourself too when you can't meet your goal. And we're trying to avoid shame and self-criticism here. Those are other parts, by the way. Check out some of my other videos. And then I also want you to give yourself a high five as well when you make progress. And again, baby steps add up. You know, I like to think of them as like rungs on a ladder. This big lofty goal may be way up here, but you're going to have lots of rungs on the ladder before you're able to meet that really high goal. So again, all of you are so awesome. I thank you so much for watching my video. If you liked it, please leave a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you want more videos. And I really appreciate all of your support. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.